In the swirling mist of Scotland's rugged Highlands, beneath the shadow of ancient mountains, whispers of rebellion stirred hearts to passion and swords to battle. Imagine a world divided by loyalty, bloodlines, and the undying call for a rightful king. The Jacobites were supporters of the House of Stuart, specifically James II of England and VII of Scotland and his descendants. The word Jacobite itself stems from the Latin Jacobus, meaning James, encapsulating their devotion to restoring this royal line to the British throne after James was ousted in the Glorious Revolution of 1688. The Highlands of Scotland became a stronghold of Jacobite support, driven by clan loyalties and opposition to centralized control from London. Many Irish Jacobites saw in James II the restoration of Catholic rights and freedoms crushed under Protestant rule. For the French, the Jacobite cause represented a strategic avenue to destabilize their British rivals, providing military and financial support to various uprisings over the decades. His son, James Francis Edward Stuart, the Old Pretender, emerged as the Jacobite hope. Even today, Jacobite symbolism and tales resonate in British consciousness, echoing the legacy of this extraordinary movement. Still, their unifying dream persisted, restoring the rightful Stuart king and reclaiming a perceived golden age lost to political expediency and religious prejudice. Thus, the Jacobites represent a crucial chapter in the complex history of Britain, a poignant reminder of the enduring power of loyalty, hope, and the dream of what might have been. Born in 1688, the year his father lost his throne, his mere existence challenged the legitimacy of subsequent Protestant monarchs. Born amidst turmoil, his life was shaped by forces far beyond his control. James spent his formative years steeped in the intricacies of royal courts, military training, and political intrigue, meticulously groomed to reclaim the crown his father had lost. Unlike his charismatic son Charles Edward, James was reserved, contemplative, and deeply religious. However, harsh weather and British naval supremacy foiled this initial attempt, forcing him back into exile. Discontent with the foreign-born George galvanized Jacobite sympathizers in England, Scotland, and Ireland. By the time he set foot on Scottish soil at Peterhead in December 1715, the uprising was already faltering. Despite his brief presence bolstering morale, lack of funds, arms, and international support doomed the revolt. His marriage to Maria Clementina Sobieska, granddaughter of Poland's King John III, brought initial joy until his death in 1766. He remained the symbolic heart of a fading yet defiant cause. His unwavering dignity, persistent resilience, and tragic failures encapsulated the spirit of Jacobitism itself, a movement defined by hopes forever just beyond reach, yet undying in its emotional power and legitimacy, producing two sons, Charles Edward Stuart, the famed Bonnie Prince Charlie, and Henry Benedict Stuart. And tragedy of the Jacobite cause, forever marking British history with the indelible legacy of his unfulfilled ambitions. However, marital discord and Maria's withdrawal into religious devotion cast shadows on James' later years, exacerbating his isolation. In February 1716, James retreated, heartbroken, back to continental exile, his credibility and leadership severely questioned. Thus, in 1715, James' supporters launched a significant uprising known as the 15. Scottish Jacobites, including powerful clan leaders, rallied thousands of men to the cause. Despite this failure, James' persistent appeals kept Jacobite hopes alive, serving as a rallying figurehead for ongoing resistance. He embodied the Stuart cause with a melancholic gravitas, living proof of a displaced royal lineage. James' supporters revered him not simply as a claimant to the throne, but as a living symbol of their aspirations and ideals. James' birth in June 1688 ignited panic in Protestant England. His years in Rome were defined by persistent diplomatic efforts, endless conspiracies, and periodic disappointment. Nonetheless, he remained a potent symbol around which Jacobite dreams coalesced. James' personal correspondence, carefully guarded by loyalists, traveled secretively between Rome, Paris, Edinburgh, and London, keeping alive the embers of rebellion. Rumors swiftly spread that he was a changeling smuggled into the royal bedchamber. So unfounded, these tales reflected the pervasive anxieties about Catholic succession. Supporters viewed him as the true king, fueling decades of plotting, rebellions, and diplomatic intrigues. Gaelic culture, fiercely independent and historically mistrustful of external authority, found common cause with the Jacobites, symbolizing resistance to the encroaching dominance of the English crown and its increasingly unified kingdom. France, seeking leverage against Britain, recognized James as James III of England and VIII of Scotland, directly challenging British sovereignty. However, French support was cautious and calculated, contingent on shifting diplomatic considerations rather than genuine enthusiasm for his cause. Welcome to the astonishing saga of the Jacobites, fierce loyalists whose daring uprisings nearly rewrote the fate of Britain forever. From secretive clans in Tartan-covered glens to lavish European courts, this is a tale drenched in bravery, betrayal, tragedy, and romance. Secret symbols, coded language, and hidden Jacobite clubs flourished. Drinking glasses etched with hidden Jacobite motifs, songs imbued with coded messages, and secret gatherings were commonplace, preserving the spirit of rebellion, even in defeat. Who truly were these legendary figures, driven by an unwavering devotion to restore their exiled monarch? How did the Old Pretender's solemn ambitions spark flames across generations, igniting revolts that shook a mighty empire? And what of Bonnie Prince Charlie, whose charismatic courage galvanized thousands, only to culminate in devastating defeat? Today, we unravel the incredible, heartbreaking, astonishingly complex story of the Jacobites, saga of lost crowns, broken dreams, and the enduring power of hope against impossible odds. To truly grasp the essence of the Jacobite cause, one must first step back into the political and religious turmoil that engulfed 17th-century Britain. The roots of this movement were intertwined deeply with religious conflict and dynastic disputes. James II was a Catholic king ruling over predominantly Protestant subjects, whose fear of a Catholic dynasty led to his deposition, and the enthronement of his Protestant daughter Mary II and her Dutch husband William III. Thus began an era marked by clandestine plotting, secret loyalties, and covert communications across the British Isles and continental Europe. Jacobitism wasn't merely about religion. It was also a complex tapestry of cultural identity, nationalism, and traditionalism. Yet Jacobitism wasn't confined to Scotland. England, Ireland, and even France housed significant Jacobite sympathizers. Jacobite society was nuanced and hierarchical, featuring nobles, clergy, soldiers, and common folk united by loyalty to their exiled monarch. In the early years, James II's exile to France ignited initial Jacobite ambitions. Throughout Britain, Jacobitism profoundly impacted culture and politics. It influenced literature, art, and public sentiment, manifesting romanticized notions of bravery, martyrdom, and lost causes. But Jacobitism wasn't without internal conflicts. Disagreements over tactics, goals, and alliances occasionally splintered supporters. This unique blend of cultural pride, political ideology, and religious fervor set the stage for a series of dramatic rebellions and uprisings shaping history, inspiring legends, and ultimately ending in heroic tragedy. Francis Edward Stuart, known to history as the Old Pretender, was a figure defined by exile, expectation, and the weight of destiny. When James II fled England later that year following the Glorious Revolution, the infant prince was spirited away to France, growing up under the protective yet watchful eyes of Louis XIV. Known for his solemn nature, James possessed a quiet dignity and seriousness befitting his tragic circumstances. The Old Pretender first emerged on the international stage during the War of the Spanish Succession, a conflict involving major European powers. In 1708, James personally attempted his first major invasion, sailing from Dunkirk with a French fleet to Scotland. The death of Queen Anne in 1714 and the ascension of the Hanoverian George I provided renewed impetus for Jacobite plotting. Yet, James' delayed arrival hampered momentum. His indecision and late landing in Scotland contributed significantly to the rebellion's failure. Following this defeat, James retreated further into isolation, establishing a courten exile in Rome, generously supported by the papacy. James' personal life was also fraught with tragedy and disappointment. Despite personal and political setbacks, James never fully abandoned the Jacobite dream. Thus, the Old Pretender remains a poignant historical figure, embodying both the promise. Charles Edward Stuart, forever immortalized as Bonnie Prince Charlie, was born on December 31, 1720. In Rome, the son of the Old Pretender, Charles was nurtured from birth to shoulder the heavy responsibility of restoring the Stuart dynasty to the British throne. He spoke English, French, and Italian fluently, and understood the subtleties of court politics from a young age. However, it was his charisma and magnetism, rather than his scholarly pursuits, that would prove most potent in rallying followers to his cause. Gifted with charisma, striking good looks, and an innate ability to inspire fierce loyalty, Charles embodied the romantic idealism of the Jacobite cause in ways his reserved father never could. Raised in the opulent yet politically isolated environment of the exiled Stuart court in Italy, Charles absorbed lessons in military strategy, diplomacy, and languages. His charm, combined with military success, seemed to validate his destiny. Charles's confidence soared, and despite some of his advisors' reservations, he pressed onward, marching his army into England, hoping to ignite a wider rebellion. Despite the stunning victory at Falkirk Muir in January 1746, morale and cohesion within Jacobite ranks deteriorated sharply. British forces, commanded by the ruthless Duke of Cumberland, regrouped and pursued relentlessly. Escape became emblematic of defiance against oppression, ensuring his legend endured. However, Charles' later life was marked by disappointment, exile, and decline. His charisma diminished, replaced by bitterness and despair, transforming the heroic young prince into a tragic figure. He died on January 31st, 1788, in Rome, his dreams unfulfilled, yet his legacy immortalized in history. They began in earnest soon after James II's deposition, and were driven by supporters' persistent desire to restore the House of Stuart to the throne. Each uprising highlighted deep-rooted grievances, regional loyalties, and the complex interplay of European politics. Attempts to rally support from France and other European powers repeatedly failed. A notable effort was the Atterbury Plot of 1722, which sought to leverage discontent with George I's government. Although discovered and thwarted, it underscored the Jacobite threat's persistence, ensuring vigilant government surveillance and repression against suspected sympathizers. James personally led an army into Ireland, hoping to reclaim his throne with French support. France and Spain again showed interest, but hesitation and shifting alliances kept substantive aid elusive. Symbols of Jacobitism, such as the white rose or Jacobite glass etched with hidden messages, persisted long after the uprisings faded, reflecting enduring sympathies and the ongoing cultural legacy of this tumultuous period. They embody the tension between tradition and progress, regional autonomy and centralized authority, ultimately shaping Britain's political and cultural identity in ways still felt today. Charles Edward Stuart's charisma galvanized support, notably among Scottish Highland clans, rallying thousands in a determined campaign that swiftly captured Edinburgh and achieved a resounding victory at Prestonpans. Militarily, they prompted substantial fortifications, improvements in army organization, and extensive use of Highland regiments loyal to the British Crown. Politically, they led to increased centralization and consolidation of power in London, reducing regional autonomy. However, the decisive defeat at Culloden in April 1746 crushed Jacobite aspirations comprehensively. The brutality of Cumberland's reprisals devastated the Highlands, dismantled clan structures, banned traditional Gaelic culture, and left an indelible scar on Scottish history. Nevertheless, these conflicts heightened Jacobite expectations, culminating in the dramatic 1745 uprising led by Bonnie Prince Charlie. It was triggered by the ascension of the Hanoverian George I, perceived as a foreign ruler, unfamiliar with British customs. The rebellion drew considerable support from Scotland, particularly in the Highlands, and even witnessed scattered support in northern England. Despite early successes, internal divisions, lack of coordination, and insufficient military support from France hampered efforts. The late arrival of James Francis Edward Stuart, the Old Pretender, further demoralized troops, leading to ultimate failure. The rebellion ended tragically, leaving Jacobite leaders executed or exiled and followers severely punished. The conflict saw dramatic battles, most notably the Siege of Derry and the Battle of the Boyne. The latter resulting in a crushing defeat for James and effectively ending his hopes of immediate restoration. The war's brutal conclusion reinforced Protestant dominance in Ireland. leading to severe political and religious repression that sowed seeds for future conflict. His story symbolized both the resilience and ultimate tragedy of the Jacobite movement, forever etched in Scottish and British consciousness as an enduring tale of ambition, heroism, and heartache. By the time Charles was in his early 20s, Jacobite ambitions were reawakening. In less than an hour, Cumberland's disciplined and well-equipped troops routed the weary and disorganized Jacobites. The battle was a catastrophe, marking the brutal end of Charles' military ambitions. He fled the battlefield, embarking on a legendary escape across the Scottish Highlands, relying on local sympathizers, including Flora MacDonald, whose bravery and cunning facilitated his disguised escape. Charles' forces reached Derby, mere days' march from London, before facing stark reality's lack of promised French support, dwindling supplies, and growing enemy strength. Reluctantly, Charles agreed to retreat northward, a decision profoundly demoralizing for his troops, who believed victory had been within their grasp. Britain's involvement in continental wars created opportunities as French animosity towards Britain resurfaced. With minimal resources and a small group of loyal followers, he sailed from France to Scotland, landing at Glenfinnan in the Highlands. Charles' arrival sparked enthusiasm and awe, quickly attracting significant clan support. Chiefs and commoners alike were captivated by his confident leadership and the legendary promise he represented. France's initial reluctance shifted when Charles personally convinced French leaders of his potential. His powerful presence and stirring speeches galvanized thousands. Within weeks, his army swelled dramatically, driven by Highland warriors fiercely loyal to their clans and the Jacobite cause. The romanticized vision of Bonnie Prince Charlie, a young, brave, and handsome prince, deeply resonated with a population yearning for cultural preservation and political autonomy. Though official French support remained limited, Charles resolved to act independently, believing passionately in the righteousness of his mission. In July 1745, Charles made a daring decision that would forever etch his name into history. At Glenfinnan, amidst wild Highland scenery, Charles unfurled his standard, proclaiming his father as King James VIII of Scotland and III of England. Rapid early victories further fueled Jacobite morale. Charles swiftly captured Edinburgh and decisively defeated British forces at Prestonpans in September 1745. However, the anticipated widespread English support failed to materialize. The retreat marked a turning point. Charles' personality, previously inspirational, now displayed stubbornness and rigidity. Conflicts with senior commanders arose, fracturing unity. The decisive encounter came on April 16, 1746 at the Battle of Culloden. Charles' dramatic flight added romantic mythology to his story, but effectively ended his active pursuit of the crown. Ultimately, Bonnie Prince Charlie spent his remaining decades drifting through Europe, haunted by what could have been. Bonnie Prince Charlie's saga transcended the historical confines of political rebellion, capturing imaginations worldwide. The Jacobite rebellions, spanning more than half a century, were marked by intense battles, heroic endeavors, and heartbreaking defeats. The initial major Jacobite rebellion, known as the Williamite War in Ireland, followed James II's forced abdication. The next significant Jacobite uprising occurred in 1715, famously known as the 15. Following the 15, smaller-scale plots continued intermittently, fueled by persistent Jacobite sympathies and external encouragement from Spain and France, both nations seeking to destabilize Britain. Another pivotal episode was the War of Jenkins' Ear, which reignited European tensions and provided Jacobites renewed hope for external support. The 45 Uprising stands as the most romanticized and devastating Jacobite rebellion. Jacobite uprisings significantly influenced British military, political, and cultural landscapes. Culturally, Jacobite rebellions inspired enduring artistic and literary expressions, embedding romantic notions of lost causes, martyrdom, nostalgia within British consciousness. In conclusion, the Jacobite uprisings represent a dramatic chapter marked by heroic ideals, harsh realities, and profound consequences. Jacobitism, though rooted deeply in British internal politics and religious strife, was fundamentally an international phenomenon. Intricately woven into the broader geopolitical fabric of Europe, the Jacobite cause garnered attention and support far beyond Britain's shores, particularly from nations with vested interests in undermining British stability and power. these international alliances. Shifting diplomatic strategies and continental intrigues profoundly shaped the Jacobite story, influencing its peaks of hope and valleys of despair. Foremost among Jacobite supporters was France, Britain's historic rival. Recognizing the strategic advantage of installing a Jacobite monarch sympathetic to French interests, Louis XIV openly supported James Francis Edward Stuart's claim. Even though French enthusiasm cooled when military realities became unfavorable, this pattern continued into the 1715 uprising, when France cautiously provided limited financial backing but withheld substantial military involvement. Sweden's Charles XII entertained Jacobite envoys, considering alliances that might distract Britain during the Great Northern War. While the papacy carefully avoided overt political entanglements, it consistently offered moral, financial, and diplomatic backing to James II and his descendants. Papal recognition lent legitimacy to the Jacobite cause, bolstering morale among Catholic supporters in Britain and Ireland, and providing essential financial aid to sustain the Stuarts in exile. It heightened governmental paranoia, prompting extensive surveillance, harsher penalties for suspected Jacobites, and greater consolidation of military and political power. Britain's foreign policy became increasingly wary of continental powers, fostering isolationist tendencies that shaped British diplomacy well into the 18th century. Russia, under Peter the Great, similarly evaluated Jacobite overtures, though pragmatic diplomacy ultimately prevailed, and significant support never materialized. To understand Jacobitism is to understand the profound role religious identity played in shaping its motivations, support base, and eventual downfall. Under King Louis XIV, France embraced James II following his deposition, hosting him lavishly at the court in Saint-Germain-en-Laye. Its open profession of Catholicism rare and unpopular in the overwhelmingly Protestant political landscape of late 17th century Britain, sparked anxiety among both the ruling elite and common populace. Meant for many Protestants, James represented a threat not only to the established church, but also to the liberties they associated with Protestant governance. Nevertheless, this involvement set a pattern. Intermittent support shaped by France's diplomatic priorities, rather than consistent ideological commitment. James II's campaign in Ireland during the Williamite War had energized these hopes. Though ultimately unsuccessful, it cemented James in Irish Catholic memory as a champion of their cause. The English Reformation, the execution of Charles I, the rise and fall of Oliver Cromwell, and the subsequent Restoration had created a deeply unstable and suspicious political religious climate. While many Highland clans supported the Jacobites, their motivations were as much cultural and political as they were religious. Highland society valued traditional clan leadership and autonomy values increasingly threatened by centralized British rule. James III and his family were portrayed as pious sufferers, true heirs to a throne lost not through misrule but through persecution. Papal audiences, ceremonial blessings, and religious relics associated with the family further enhanced this sacred image. For some clans, the Jacobite cause represented a defense of their way of life rather than religious ideology alone. Enlightenment ideals, secular governance, and growing skepticism toward divine right monarchy eroded the foundations upon which Jacobitism had been built. Even Catholic supporters began to question whether a Stuart restoration was viable or desirable in an increasingly modern, pluralistic Britain. Moreover, there were Protestant Jacobites, especially Episcopalians in Scotland, who supported the Stuarts due to loyalty and conservative principles rather than Catholic sympathies. Yet, its impact on British history was undeniable. It had shaped policies, spurred wars, and deepened religious divisions whose echoes would be felt for generations. Catholicism had become equated with absolutism, foreign influence, and repression, while Protestantism came to symbolize constitutional monarchy, parliamentary rule, and national identity. It infused its rhetoric, inspired its supporters, and ultimately defined its fate. Understanding Jacobitism without acknowledging its religious dimensions would be to miss the very core of its enduring power and tragic demise. The Catholic identity of the Stuarts sometimes alienated potential Protestant allies, particularly in England, where anti-Catholic sentiment remained strong. To them, the rightful king had been cast out due to religious bigotry, Jacobite efforts to reassure Protestant supporters were often undercut by papal backing and the presence of Catholic priests in Jacobite courts and camps. After the defeat at Culloden, anti-Catholic sentiment only intensified, fueling the British government's determination to suppress not just Jacobitism, but any lingering traces of Catholic influence. Jacobitism emerged from this belief, asserting that divine right and hereditary succession should outweigh political expediency and sectarian bias, and clandestine masses held in Jacobite households kept the faith alive in secret. Jacobite songs and ballads often invoked divine providence and the hope of heavenly justice for the exiled king. The cause thus became deeply entwined with Catholic hopes of religious restoration and civil equality. Jacobite agents navigated royal courts, secret negotiations, and covert missions to secure funding, arms, and diplomatic recognition. The Glorious Revolution of 1688, to replace James with his Protestant daughter Mary II and her husband William III, was widely supported by those who saw it as a safeguard of Protestant liberty. These networks relied heavily on intricate communication channels involving coded letters, hidden compartments in clothing, and trusted couriers. Reflecting the high stakes and constant threat of discovery, while external support enabled repeated rebellions and sustained hope, reliance on uncertain alliances and fluctuating diplomatic interests proved a significant weakness. Jacobite fortunes rose and fell with the shifting tides of European politics, leaving their cause perpetually vulnerable to betrayal and abandonment. Jacobite exiles in France frequently found themselves subject to shifting political winds, their status rising or falling with diplomatic expediency rather than genuine friendship. For France, supporting the Jacobites served dual purposes. It represented both Catholic solidarity against Protestantism and a calculated geopolitical strategy to keep Britain destabilized and distracted from broader European ambitions. During the Williamite War in Ireland, French military aid was crucial, though insufficient to turn the tide. Spanish courts provided refuge and intermittent backing, exemplified by Spain's support of the abortive Jacobite invasion in 1719, which saw a small Spanish force land in Scotland. Although quickly suppressed, the incident highlighted Spain's willingness to exploit Jacobitism as a geopolitical lever against Britain. French support resurged notably during the War of the Spanish Succession. Jacobitism also resonated deeply in Spain. Spanish interests primarily stemmed from strategic rivalry with Britain, particularly over colonial interests and maritime dominance. Beyond France and Spain, Jacobitism briefly drew the attention of other European powers, including Sweden and Russia, each perceiving potential advantages in British instability. The Papal States represented another crucial, albeit subtler, source of Jacobite support. International Jacobitism fostered extensive espionage networks, diplomatic intrigue, and clandestine operations spanning Europe. The international dimension of Jacobitism had profound consequences within Britain. Ultimately, Jacobitism's international dimension was both its strength and its vulnerability. Thus, Jacobitism remains a compelling example of how domestic aspirations can become enmeshed in international conflicts, shaping history through an intricate web of alliances, rivalries, and diplomatic maneuvers that resonate far beyond national borders. Religion lay at the very heart of the Jacobite cause, acting as both a rallying point and a point of contention that defined allegiances and stoked the flames of rebellion. James II was the last Catholic monarch of England, Scotland, and Ireland. This religious divide was not merely theological, it had historical roots. Thus, when James II ascended the throne and began appointing Catholics to positions of power, suspending anti-Catholic laws, and fostering ties with Catholic France, it stoked fears of a return to autocracy. Yet, for many Catholics and traditionalists, the removal of James was an illegal usurpation. Irish Catholics, in particular, embraced Jacobitism as a vehicle for reversing the harsh penal laws that restricted their rights to own land, practice their faith openly, and participate in government. In Scotland, however, the picture was more complex. This ideological diversity within Jacobitism was both a strength and a weakness. It allowed the movement to attract a broad coalition of supporters, but also made unity difficult. The Church of England, the Church of Scotland, and the dissenting Protestant movements all viewed Catholicism with suspicion. Religious symbolism pervaded Jacobite iconography and ritual, The White Rose of the Stuarts, prayers for the king over the water in Rome. The exiled Stuarts maintained an aura of religious sanctity. However, as the 18th century wore on, religious identity became less of a unifying force and more of a limiting factor. By the time of Bonnie Prince Charlie's death in 1788 and the death of his brother, Cardinal Henry Benedict Stuart in 1807, the religious heart of Jacobitism had largely faded into a nostalgic memory. Thus, religion in Jacobitism was never a side note, it was the soul of the cause. Often overshadowed by the exploits of male monarchs, generals, and clan chiefs. The women of the Jacobite era played indispensable roles in sustaining, advancing, and preserving the cause. From spies and couriers to patrons and cultural preservers, Jacobite women embodied a quiet yet formidable resistance that shaped the movement's history and legacy. They acted as mediators, intelligence agents, fundraisers, and symbols of loyalty. Disguising him as her Irish maid, Flora smuggled Charles across dangerous terrain to the Isle of Skye, evading British patrols. Her bravery elevated her to near mythical status, a testament to how individual women shaped critical moments in the Jacobite narrative. In many cases, they used their positions within noble families and courtly circles to influence policy and protect fellow supporters. While they rarely led troops into battle, Jacobite women were deeply embedded in the movement's political, familial, and social networks. They were vulnerable to political reprisals, asset seizures, imprisonment, and social ostracism. They passed down songs, stories, and customs that kept Jacobite memory alive through generations. Figures like Queen Clementina Sobieska, wife of James Francis Edward Stuart, embodied Catholic virtue and dynastic legitimacy. Their bravery, sacrifice, and loyalty contributed significantly to the movement's endurance and to the cultural legacy that followed its decline. These women preserved traditions, sustained hope, and performed acts of everyday resistance that, taken together, fortified the soul of Jacobism. Her presence added moral weight to the Jacobite claim, and her correspondence with European courts helped maintain fragile alliances. Female poets and ballad singers, though often anonymous, played vital roles in shaping the movement's mythos and emotional resonance. Nicknamed the Butcher for his actions, Cumberland ordered the execution of wounded Jacobite soldiers on the battlefield and implemented a scorched earth policy throughout the Highlands. The Heritable Jurisdictions Act of 1747 abolished the traditional rights of clan chiefs to hold courts and administer justice, effectively stripping them of their semi-autonomous power. Military garrisons were established across the Highlands, and a network of roads and forts was constructed to enable rapid troop deployment and tighter control over the region. Homes were burned, livestock slaughtered, and entire communities displaced. With the traditional clan leadership disempowered and populations scattered, Highland communities struggled to adapt. In the decades following Culloden, particularly during the late 18th and early 19th centuries, writers and poets began to reframe the Jacobite story not as treason, but as tragic heroism. The king famously wore Highland dress, and clan pageantry was revived, ironically celebrating symbols that had once been banned. The government's earlier policies of suppression gave way to a commodified celebration of the very culture it had tried to erase, and in the folk songs that kept the past alive. Though no longer a political threat, it endured as a symbol of loyalty, defiance, and romantic longing. Figures like Sir Walter Scott turned Bonnie Prince Charlie into a romantic icon, and the Highlands into a land of noble rebels. Charles Edward Stuart died in 1788, embittered and childless. His brother, Henry Benedict Stuart, became a cardinal and outlived him by nearly 2 decades. With Henry's death in 1807, the direct male line of the royal Stuarts ended, closing a final chapter in the dynastic claim. Many Jacobite sympathizers emigrated, whether by choice or compulsion, to the Americas, where they contributed to the Scottish diaspora and carried with them memories of lost causes and defiant dreams. The Dress Act of 1746 banned the wearing of Highland dress, including tartan and kilts, for anyone outside of the military. This law struck at a potent symbol of Highland identity and Jacobite pride, attempting to erase the very visual markers of resistance. Violations could result in imprisonment or even transportation to the colonies. While the British state succeeded in quelling rebellion and reshaping the Highlands, It also inadvertently laid the groundwork for a powerful mythology. The Jacobite cause, defeated in battle, survived in spirit, an eternal echo of one of the most passionate struggles in British history. The British government aimed to destroy the social and cultural structures that had sustained the rebellion. Clergy who refused to swear allegiance to the Hanoverian regime were barred from preaching, fined, or exiled. These measures aimed to sever the ideological and spiritual ties that had fueled past rebellions. Many suffered in silence, holding together families and estates, while their husbands, brothers, and sons went to war. The crushing defeat at Culloden was not simply a military loss, it triggered one of the most aggressive campaigns of suppression in British history. Some women chose to go into exile with the Stuart court, enduring years of hardship and political isolation. One of the most iconic figures was Flora MacDonald, whose courageous decision to aid Bonnie Prince Charlie's escape after the Battle of Culloden has become legendary. Although their relationship was fraught with political and personal difficulties, Clementina's presence at court represented the complicated role women played in influencing Jacobite diplomacy and perception. In 1716, when her husband was imprisoned in the Tower of London following the failed 15 rebellion, she orchestrated a dramatic and daring rescue by disguising him in women's clothing and smuggling him past the guards. Her actions not only saved her husband's life, but also became a celebrated tale of female heroism in Jacobite lore. Another powerful figure was Clementina Walkinshaw, who became the mistress of Bonnie Prince Charlie and later the mother of his daughter. Lady Winifred Maxwell, Countess of Nithdale, demonstrated resourcefulness and loyalty of extraordinary measure. Aristocratic women like Lady Anne Mackintosh raised regiments of men to fight for the cause, while others penned letters and distributed pamphlets supporting the Stuart claim. Women also played crucial roles behind the scenes. They maintained networks of communication, hosted secret Jacobite gatherings, and used domestic spaces as hubs of conspiracy and resistance. At the same time, Jacobite women faced unique perils. Culturally, Jacobite women contributed to the preservation of Highland traditions and oral histories. Women in the exiled Stuart court also wielded diplomatic and symbolic power. Historians have increasingly recognized that far from being passive bystanders, women were dynamic agents of the Jacobite cause. In retrospect, the Jacobite movement's success or failure hinged not solely on battlefield valor, but also on the quieter, often unacknowledged efforts of its female adherents. Thus, the story of the Jacobite cause is incomplete without acknowledging the critical role played by women navigating within and beyond the constraints of their time to become pillars of one of the most passionate and enduring political movements in British history. The aftermath of the final Jacobite rebellion in 1746 marked a decisive turning point not only for the movement itself, but also for the British state and its relationship with the Highlands. The Duke of Cumberland, who led the government forces at Culloden, initiated a ruthless effort to root out Jacobitism once and for all. Key to this campaign was the dismantling of the clan system. In tandem with political suppression came a targeted cultural assault. The Episcopal Church in Scotland, closely associated with Jacobitism, also faced increased restrictions. The economic and social consequences for the Highlands were profound. However, this period of suppression also gave rise to a fascinating countercurrent: the romanticization of the Jacobite cause. This cultural rehabilitation culminated in events like King George IV's visit to Edinburgh in 1822, orchestrated by Scott himself. Meanwhile, the last surviving members of the Stuart dynasty faded into history. Yet Jacobitism did not die entirely. It lingered in cultural memory, in the toasts to the king over the water, in clandestine family relics. Thus, the suppression of the Jacobites was both an act of erasure and a catalyst for transformation. Though militarily crushed, Jacobitism did not fade from the public imagination. Instead, it transformed into a potent cultural legacy, immortalized through literature, music, theater, and visual art. His historical novels, such as Waverley and Rob Roy, painted the Jacobite rebellions with sweeping romantic brushstrokes. Tunes like the Skyboat song, Will the No Come Back Again, and Bonnie Charlie's Now Awa became anthems of longing and loss, commemorating Bonnie Prince Charlie's escape and the Highlanders' sacrifice. Playwrights infused scripts with references to lost kings, noble failures and exiled royalty, tapping into the emotional undercurrents of audience sympathies. Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, captivated by the Highland mystique, adopted tartan in royal decor and dress. Balmoral Castle, designed with Highland motifs, embodied this transformation. What had once been banned was now celebrated, divorced from its rebellious origins. These productions reinforced Jacobite narratives of honor and sacrifice. Places like Culloden battlefield, the Palace of Holy Rood House, and Glenfinnan Monument serve as tangible links to the past, drawing visitors eager to connect with this evocative period. Reenactments, exhibitions, and interpretive centers foster historical engagement, blending education with commemoration. The Jacobite cause, which began as a dynastic struggle rooted in loyalty to the House of Stuart, evolved into a complex symbol of resistance, identity, and longing that extended far beyond its original aims. The failure of the Stuarts to regain the throne solidified the authority of the Hanoverian monarchy and the primacy of Parliament over hereditary divine right. Jacobitism, therefore, indirectly helped to define and consolidate Britain's modern constitutional monarchy, reinforcing Protestant succession and the gradual move toward a parliamentary democracy. Ironically, the British monarchy, that had once been the Jacobite movement's greatest enemy, now played a leading role in memorializing its iconography. Victoria's embrace of Highland culture at Balmoral Castle, influenced by the writings of Sir Walter Scott, helped popularize a sanitized version of Jacobitism that focused on romance and valor, rather than political insurgency. The movement's early support of James II and the promise of Catholic restoration lingered in Irish cultural memory, contributing to later nationalist sentiments. Songs, folklore, and literature perpetuated the myth of the lost Stuart kings as symbols of a better, more just era denied by Protestant domination. Films, television dramas, and historical documentaries revisited the rebellions, often emphasizing their romantic and tragic elements. The Stuarts' Catholicism had been one of the primary causes of their rejection, and their failure confirmed the Protestant orientation of the British state. However, among British Catholics, the Stuart royal line retained a spiritual allure, even after its extinction, symbolizing both persecution and perseverance. Scottish independence movements, for instance, occasionally reference Jacobitism as part of a broader heritage of resistance to central authority. Though it did not restore the Stuarts, it gave rise to stories, symbols, and sentiments that endure. It reminds us that history is not solely the domain of victors, but also of those who dared to hope against odds and who left behind a legend far greater than a throne. While modern political aims differ drastically from those of the 18th century, the symbolism of Jacobite struggle retains a certain rhetorical potency. Though the movement had pan-British ambitions, its strongest support was undeniably Scottish, and its suppression disproportionately affected Highland communities. Sites like Culloden, Glenfinnan, and Holy Rood House attract thousands of visitors annually. Drawn by the evocative landscapes and stories of loyalty and loss, websites, podcasts, and historical forums allow enthusiasts from around the world to engage with the period. Social media has amplified the reach of Jacobite songs, reenactments, and historical content, connecting diverse audiences with the drama and depth of the era. Reenactments, museum exhibitions, and cultural festivals keep the memory alive, ensuring that the cause continues to capture the public imagination. Academic historians have revisited the movement with increasing nuance, exploring its ideological diversity, regional dynamics, and transnational dimensions. New studies challenge older romantic narratives while acknowledging the emotional power they continue to hold. Over time, the story of Jacobitism became woven into the cultural fabric of Scotland, contributing to a romanticized notion of Scottish history that persists today. Kilts, tartans, and Highland symbols once outlawed in the wake of the rebellions were later revived and embraced as national emblems. What began as a series of failed uprisings has become a powerful mythos, one that continues to inspire artists, historians, and storytellers. The Jacobite cause, etched in poetry, song, and story, lives on as a symbol of passionate loyalty, tragic loss, and the enduring allure of the lost cause. Many Highlanders, displaced by the aftermath of Culloden and the dismantling of the clan system, emigrated to the American colonies, There, they preserved cultural practices and passed down stories of their rebellions. Some of these emigrants would later participate in the American Revolution, drawing ideological parallels between their opposition to centralized British power and their ancestors' loyalty to the Stuart cause. Blending time travel romance with historical fiction, the series portrays the 1745 uprising with vivid detail and emotional intensity. Its massive success, including the accompanying television adaptation, introduced the Jacobite cause to millions worldwide, further embedding it in contemporary popular consciousness. The image of Bonnie Prince Charlie, a charismatic leader fleeing across wild landscapes, remains central to these retellings. Historians have increasingly examined the movement with a critical lens, moving beyond romantic tropes to explore its complexities, internal divisions, and broader political contexts. Scholarly reassessments have deepened our understanding, while still acknowledging the enduring emotional pull of Jacobite narratives. These songs carried emotional resonance across generations, binding identity, music, and memory into a deeply rooted cultural tapestry. These works blended historical events with fictional characters, embedding the Jacobite struggle in a narrative of chivalry, loyalty, and Highland valor. Artists like John Petty and William Allen created vivid, often idealized scenes of Jacobite uprisings, tartan-clad warriors, and secret meetings. These images further entrenched the aesthetic of Jacobitism as an honorable, albeit tragic, episode of resistance. Scott's portrayals helped recast Jacobites from political rebels into tragic heroes, contributing to the wider reappraisal of the Highlands and its culture. The romanticism of noble rebellion, tragic loss, and doomed loyalty found fertile ground in 18th and 19th century artistic expression, shaping popular perceptions of the Jacobite cause for centuries to come. One of the earliest literary architects of Jacobite nostalgia was Scottish novelist and poet Sir Walter Scott. Ballads and folk songs also played a crucial role in preserving the Jacobite memory. Painters and illustrators contributed to the visual romanticization of Jacobitism. Theatrical performances throughout the 18th and 19th centuries featured Jacobite themes, sometimes subtly to bypass censorship. Jacobitism also penetrated broader British culture. Ironically, the Hanoverian establishment that had fought so hard to suppress it began to appropriate Jacobite symbols. In the 20th century, Jacobitism maintained its grip on popular culture. More recently, literary works such as Diana Gabaldon's Outlander series have reignited global interest in the Jacobite era. Academic interest in Jacobitism has also flourished. Museums, heritage sites, and cultural festivals continue to celebrate Jacobite history. In some Jacobitism's cultural afterlife has far outlasted its political viability, though the Jacobite risings ultimately ended in failure. The legacy of the movement continues to resonate centuries later, politically, culturally, and emotionally. One of the most enduring aspects of Jacobite legacy lies in the reshaping of the British monarchy and constitutional balance. In Scotland, especially the Highlands, the Jacobite cause became a powerful element of national identity. This revival was particularly noticeable during the 19th century, when Queen Victoria's affection for Scotland helped rehabilitate the Highland image. The Jacobite legacy also had a profound influence on diaspora communities, especially in North America. In Ireland, Jacobitism continued to resonate with Catholic identity and resistance. Religiously, the Jacobite defeat reinforced the marginalization of Catholicism in Britain. Today, Jacobitism survives as both a historical subject and a cultural phenomenon. At the same time, the Jacobite cause is frequently invoked in popular culture and political discourse. Heritage tourism remains a tangible manifestation of Jacobitism's legacy. In the digital age, Jacobite history has found new life online. Ultimately, the legacy of the Jacobite cause lies in its ability to transcend failure. As with any movement steeped in legend and romance, Jacobitism has accumulated its fair share of myths and misconceptions. Over the centuries, these distorted narratives have often obscured the more complex political and social realities of the Jacobite cause. While it is true that many Highland clans were enthusiastic supporters of the cause, Jacobitism was in fact a pan-British and even pan-European phenomenon. It drew support from England, Wales, Ireland, and the continent, with adherents from all social classes and religious backgrounds. Reducing the movement to a Highland rebellion simplifies its diversity and diminishes the contributions of Lowland Scots, English Tories, Irish Catholics, and European allies. Many Scots, particularly in the lowlands, supported the Hanoverian government. In reality, they were carefully planned political and military campaigns that involved sophisticated networks of diplomacy, espionage, and financial backing. While the military campaigns were ultimately unsuccessful, the ideals and grievances of Jacobitism persisted in various forms through religious dissent, cultural resistance, and political critique. The movement's influence extended well into the 19th century, reshaping national identity and historical memory across Britain. Stuart agents operated in France, Spain, Italy, Poland, and Russia. Rather than romanticizing or vilifying these institutions, focus on education and engagement, fostering critical reflection on the causes, events, and consequences of the risings. It reveals a movement shaped by its time complex, contradictory, and deeply rooted in the lived experiences of its supporters. Far from being a simple tale of doomed loyalty or regal ambition, Jacobitism emerges as a multifaceted struggle over identity, governance, and belief. Refugee communities in North America kept the memory alive, and Jacobite rhetoric found echoes in revolutionary movements far beyond the British Isles. The real story of the Jacobites, free from embellishment, is no less compelling. It is a story of courage and miscalculation, hope and hardship, idealism and reality. The Stuart court, in exile, cut off from its homeland, clung to rituals and memory to sustain its identity. For diasporas around the world, this resonates profoundly. The thousands who fought, suffered, or perished for the Stuart cause did so in service of an idea they believed was just. Their sacrifices remind us that history is not merely shaped by grand strategy or geopolitical forces, but by individuals willing to risk everything for belief, loyalty, and love. The Jacobite cause evokes the ache of displacement and the resilience of cultural memory, a yearning that transcends geography and time. Its legacy includes not only courage and loyalty, but also authoritarian impulses, sectarian divides, and episodes of violence. Toasts are still raised to the king over the water. Museums, plays, and historical reenactments keep the story alive not as a call to arms, but as an invitation to remember, to question, and to learn. The full picture of Jacobitism is one of complexity and contradiction, a reminder that historical memory must be approached with both reverence and critical awareness. From 18th century ballads to modern podcasts and YouTube documentaries, the movement's resonance adapts to new mediums and new audiences. It is a tale of valor and vulnerability, of dreams pursued and dashed. And in those stories we find reflections of ourselves, our values, our conflicts, and our enduring quest for purpose and belonging in the currents of history. This adaptability is a testament to its emotional depth and cultural significance. Its transformation from a political movement into a cultural identity has helped shape modern Scotland's sense of itself. From the ousting of James II and the Glorious Revolution to the harrowing aftermath of Culloden, Jacobitism was never merely a dynastic struggle. It was an expression of competing visions for Britain's future: monarchical tradition versus constitutional governance, centralized power versus regional autonomy, religious uniformity versus pluralistic tolerance. While the historical parallels may not always hold, the emotional power of the Jacobite story lends weight to arguments about self-governance and cultural preservation. This relevance ensures that Jacobitism, while no longer a live political force, remains intellectually and emotionally potent. Whether in the revival of the Gaelic language, the preservation of Highland traditions, or the symbolic use of Tartan and clan heritage, Jacobitism contributes to an ongoing narrative of resilience and self-definition. And it is a story that, when told truthfully, continues to speak powerfully to the complexities of national memory and the enduring human desire for justice and belonging. The risings were the result of deliberate coordination with European powers, secret societies, and court factions, all working toward a common goal of restoring the Stuarts. Their contributions provide a richer understanding of the movement's social texture and emotional depth, revealing a cause that was not only political, but profoundly human. Why does it continue to capture the imagination, stir debate, and inspire cultural expression nearly 3 centuries after its final military defeat? Political allegiance in 18th century Scotland was deeply divided, with economic interest, clan rivalries, and religious affiliations playing major roles. The Jacobites fought to restore what they saw as a legitimate and divinely ordained monarchy. Yet their resistance also challenged rising notions of constitutionalism and popular sovereignty. Today, in an age grappling with its own tensions between heritage and progress, the Jacobite narrative offers a lens to examine how societies define legitimacy, authority, and identity. Jacobitism is no longer only the story of a dethroned dynasty. It is a powerful allegory, a canvas onto which successive generations have projected their ideals, fears, and hopes. Some clans even fought against the Jacobites, and many ordinary Scots chose neutrality, weary of war and disruption. In recent decades, historians have worked diligently to untangle the myth from the reality, providing a clearer, more nuanced understanding of Jacobitism and its role in British history. One of the most persistent myths is that Jacobitism was purely a Scottish nationalist movement, specifically rooted in Highland culture. Another popular misconception is that the Jacobites were backward-looking reactionaries clinging to a feudal past. This interpretation ignores the movement's adaptability and ideological range. While undeniably charismatic and courageous, Charles Edward Stuart also demonstrated serious flaws as a leader. His strategic miscalculations, autocratic tendencies, and inability to manage internal divisions contributed significantly to the failure of the 1745 Rising. Historians now paint a more balanced picture, one that recognizes his talents, but does not shy away from his shortcomings. While some Jacobites were indeed traditionalists seeking a return to monarchical absolutism, others envisioned a more balanced model of governance. For many, especially in Ireland and the Scottish Highlands, Jacobitism offered hope for religious tolerance, regional autonomy, and the preservation of local traditions in the face of centralizing, modernizing forces. Equally misleading is the romanticized portrayal of Bonnie Prince Charlie as a flawless hero. The notion that the Jacobites were universally popular among the Scottish people is also exaggerated. Additionally, the belief that the Jacobite rebellions were spontaneous uprisings fueled solely by emotion is a myth. Reassessment has also challenged the traditional narrative of total defeat and obliteration. In reassessing Jacobitism, historians have also explored the experiences of marginalized voices, women, Gaelic speakers, Catholic clergy, and exiled communities whose roles were long overlooked. Modern scholarship has emphasized the transnational nature of Jacobitism. The cause was not limited to Britain. It resonated across Europe and even the Americas. Public history has also evolved. Museums, archives, and interpretive centers now aim to present a fuller, more accurate picture of the Jacobite past. Ultimately, peeling back the layers of myth allows for a deeper appreciation of Jacobitism. Understanding the Jacobite cause through a modern historical lens does not diminish its drama or poignancy, enriches it. As we arrive at the final chapter in the long and storied tale of Jacobitism, we must ask, what does this complex and ultimately unsuccessful movement still mean today? The answer lies in the movement's extraordinary capacity to symbolize universal human experiences: loyalty, loss, resistance, and longing. At its heart, Jacobitism represents the enduring struggle between tradition and change. Jacobitism also speaks to the nature of exile and belonging. Furthermore, Jacobitism continues to reflect on the personal costs of political conviction. In the Scottish context, Jacobitism has become a symbol of national pride and cultural resurgence. Modern political movements occasionally draw upon the Jacobite past to frame contemporary struggles over sovereignty, autonomy, and national identity. Yet it is also crucial to recognize the dangers of overly romanticizing Jacobitism. Jacobitism also endures through ritual and commemoration. Each year, ceremonies at Culloden honor the fallen. In literature, music, and even digital storytelling, Jacobitism continues to evolve. Ultimately, the enduring meaning of Jacobitism lies not in what it failed to achieve, but in the stories it left behind. So as we close this chapter, Let us not think of Jacobitism as a relic, but as a mirror held up to history, to culture, and to the human spirit. The story of the Jacobites is a saga of defiance, devotion, and identity that stretches far beyond the battlefield.